experience is always limited. Right? I may blow up that experience into kind of fantastic affair, and then set up a shop to sell my experience. But that experience is limited. And so knowledge is always limited. And this knowledge is operating in the brain. This knowledge is the brain. Right? And thought is also part of the brain, and that thought is limited. So the brain is operating in a very, very small area.
Yes, but what prevents it from operating in a broader area? What is preventing it from operating in an unlimited area? Thought. No, but thought, the brain, it seems to me, is running on its own, from its own program, right?
Yes, like a computer that's running on its own program.
Yes. Now, essentially, what you're asking is that the brain that should really be responding to the mind. That it can only respond if it is free from the thought which is limited. Yes, so the program does not dominate it. You see, we are going to still need that program.
Of course, we need for
many things, yes, but the intelligence, I mean, which is intelligence from the mind then?
Yes, intelligence is the mind.
Yes, the mind.
Because now that comes into, we must go into something else. Because compassion is related to intelligence. There is no intelligence without compassion. And compassion can only be when there is love, which is completely free from all remembrances, personal jealousies and all that kind of thing.
Now, is all that compassion, love, also of the mind?
Of the mind. And you cannot be compassionate if you are attached to any particular experience or any particular ideal.
Yes, well, that's again the program that is just holding you.
Yes.
But
say, for instance, there are those people who go out various poverty-ridden countries and work, and they call that compassion. But they are attached or tied to a particular form of religious belief. And therefore that's merely pity, sympathy, but it's not compassion.
Yes, well, I understand that we have here two things which can be somewhat independent. There's the brain and the mind, though they make contact. Now then, intelligence and compassion, we say, come from beyond the brain. Now then, I would like to go into the question of how they are making contact, you see. That is...
contact can only exist between the mind and the brain when the brain is quiet.
Yes, that's the condition for making it. That's the requirement for making it. Now then, the brain has got to be quiet. Now,
quiet is not a trained quietness. Not a self-conscious, meditative desire for silence. It's a natural outcome of understanding one's own conditioning.
Yes, and one can see that if the brain is quiet, then it can, you could almost say it can listen to something deeper, right?
Deeper, that's right. Then if it is quiet, it's related to the brain.
Yes.
Then to the mind. Then the mind can function through the brain.
Now, I think that it would help if we could see, with regard to the brain, whether it has any activity which is beyond thought. You see, for example, one could ask, is awareness part of a function of the brain?
As long as awareness in which there is no choice, I'm aware, and in that awareness I choose.
Yes, well, I think that may cause difficulty. You see, what is wrong with choice?
Choice means confusion.
It's not obvious just from the word. You see that.
Of course, to choose between two things.
Yeah, now I could choose whether I buy one thing or another.
I can choose between this table and that table.
Or choose the colors when I buy the table.
Yes, this better table.
That apparently need not be confused.
Huh?
If I choose which color I want, I don't see why that has to be confused.
There's nothing wrong.
Yeah, now.
There's no confusion there.
But the choice about the psyche, it seems to me, is where the confusion is.
We are talking about the psyche.
Yeah, one tends to, the language tends to carry you away, you see.
Yes. And we are talking of the psyche that chooses.
Yes, that chooses to become, really.
Yes, chooses to become, and also choice exists where there is confusion.
Yes, well, you're saying out of confusion, the psyche makes a choice to become one thing or another.
Yeah.
Right? That being confused, it tries to become something better. Right?
And choice implies a duality.
Yes, but now it seems at first sight we have another duality you've introduced, which is the mind and the brain.
No, that's not a duality.
Yeah, well, that's important to get clear.
That's not a duality.
Yes, what is the difference?
All right, let's take a very simple example. Human beings are violent. And this has been, non-violence has been projected by thought. And that is the duality, the fact and the non-fact.
Well, you're saying there's a duality between a fact and some mere projection which the mind makes.
The ideal and the fact.
Yes, and the ideal is unreal and the fact is real.
That's it, the ideal is not actual.
Yes, that's it, not actual. Now what that, you say the division of those two you call duality, but why do you give it that name? Yeah.
Because they're divided.
Well, at least they appear to be divided.
Divided, and we are struggling, as all, say for instance, the totalitarian communist ideals and the democratic ideals, they are the outcome of thought and so on, which is limited, and this is creating havoc in the world.
Yes, so there's a division which has been brought in, but I think we were discussing in terms of dividing something which cannot be divided, right? We're trying to divide the psyche. Right?
Violence cannot be divided into non-violence.
Yeah, and the psyche cannot be divided into violent and non-violent. That is,
it is what it is.
It is what it is. So if it's violent, it cannot be divided into a violent and a non-violent part. Right?
So that's very good. So can we remain with what is, not with what should be, what must be, and invent ideals and all the rest of it?